Hello, I'm Sandra Scheller, and I'm with Comic-Con Education. Today, I have some really special guests because I'm here in Las Vegas.
Hi, I'm Esther Finder, and I'm one of the co-creators of the exhibit that we'll be seeing later.
Hi, I'm Susan Dubin. I'm the Educational Specialist and Library Director here at the Sperling Kronberg Mack Holocaust Resource Center.
Before we see your exhibit, I would love to be able to take some time with you and talk about what you've created in beautiful Las Vegas at Temple Beth Shalom in the center. Come join us.
When I set up this display, I set it up so that this side have the books that are cartoons and comics that are Holocaust related, and this side are the graphic novels.
Well, during desperate times, this is what we're using. Why not? Susan, I want to know something about you. Where are you from? When did you come here? And what got you involved in setting up a Holocaust resource center? It's really incredible.
I moved to Las Vegas in 2012. I thought I was retiring. We came from Los Angeles, and I'd been a librarian since 1982 and involved in education since 1966. When I moved here, Esther and I had a mutual friend who was in Washington, D.C., and she said, when you go to Las Vegas, there's somebody you have to meet. You have to meet Esther Finder. So when I got here, I met Esther. And Esther just happened to mention that the Holocaust Resource Center was looking for a librarian.
Wow.
So I went over to the Resource Center at that time, and I was horrified because it was not a library. It was a room with books. It was really not a real library. Mm-hmm. So what I did is I gave them a proposal of what it would take to turn it into a library. So when I started there, I started in 2012, I first of all weeded the collection, took out all the books that were not appropriate for it.
Wow.
And then we proceeded to organize the books and catalog them. Mm-hmm. None of the books had been cataloged, and of course, nowadays it's important that books not only be cataloged but be accessible online. Mm-hmm. So we cataloged all the books and entered them all into a computer database, and now our entire collection is online.
How many books do you think you have?
We have about 5,500 books.
Oh my gosh.
And in addition to
all Holocaust related?
They're all Holocaust or World War II.
Who uses this resource center?
The Resource Center is a public library. We're under the auspices of the Governor's Advisory Council on matters relating to the Holocaust education. And we are one of the branches under that organization. We have one here, one in Reno, and one in Elko. As the library director, I oversee the collection development in all three places. Mm-hmm. However, this library in particular, it is open to the general public. Anyone can come in and check out our books. And just like in a public library, they can take them out for 3 weeks and renew them as they wish. Most of our books are used, however, by the Clark County School District. Mm-hmm. I teach a number of courses to teachers for professional development so that they can teach Holocaust education to their students.
Do you also have films? Do you have recordings of people? Tell me if there's more than just books here.
Yes. In the upstairs portion of the library, which you are looking at now, we have our books and our posters and some of our artifacts. Downstairs, we have our DVD collection and our adult fiction, our adult biography, a special collection that was donated to us by Leopold Page, and our reference books.
Wow.
The library was established in the late 1970s, and it has moved several times since then. We have been in this location for just about a month. We moved everything here from the other side of Las Vegas in Henderson and set up this library. It was originally established by Edith Katz and Henry Kronberg and Judy Mack. They're our founders. And when we set up this library, much of the furniture was donated by Steve Mack, who is Judy's son. Actually, today we are going to be affixing the mezuzah to the door, and Henry is going to be joining us for that ceremony. Henry is our oldest living survivor in Las Vegas. He's going to be 101 in April this year.
Can I ask you, were your parents in the Holocaust?
No. My parents...
So you have a passion for this.
Yes.
You are like pure education, because some of us whose parents were in the Holocaust know things from survivors, but from our families and our generations. But what you did was truly go beyond to understand the whole world of the Holocaust from in the 30s up through 1945 and afterwards, as people were trying to figure out how they were going to get their life together.
Part of that is because I'm a Judaic librarian.
Mm-hmm.
I'm the past president of the International Association of Jewish Libraries. And as a Judaic librarian, obviously one of the areas of interest is the Holocaust.
One of the things that I truly love about you, Susan, is that I've been blessed to work with you. The programs, the creativity. I think it's really important for the viewers who are watching, for Comic-Con Education, are making it a point that if you're stuck on how to teach the Holocaust, what age is appropriate, what can be taught for that, I think here in Las Vegas, of all things, Susan is going to be your answer.
This is our traveling collection, and in non-COVID times, this would go to schools, and it would either be in the library or in a teacher's classroom, and we would send it the whole cart with all of the books on it, so that a class or a group of classes that were learning about the Holocaust would have resources that are appropriate for middle and high school available to them. Many of the school libraries have some books on the Holocaust, but this would augment their collection and give teachers additional resources.
What made you decide to pick and choose the ones that you have?
These are books that are specifically recommended for young adults, and a lot of them I chose because they talk about young people, or young people are the featured protagonists or the actors that are in the story. So, for example, I have Life in the Warsaw Ghetto, Courageous Teen Resistors. So it's about the students' age level, people that were in the Holocaust, and they seem to be able to relate to that a lot better than if they're talking about just adults.
This is catching my eye right here.
Well, again, when we send this to schools, we usually include one or two actual artifacts. And this is a Bible that we received from a survivor. And I don't know the provenance, unfortunately. It was here when I came. But it is one of the survivors' Bibles, and I think it makes it more real for students if they can see and touch something that belonged to somebody that actually was in the Holocaust.
And I love the idea that you focus, for instance, with Anne Frank, and that you have more than just one copy, so that that it doesn't. It's less wear and tear on a book when there's more copies.
Plus, it's more interesting for students if they can read it with somebody else. It's a tradition in Jewish study to study with a friend.
Yeah, like the Talmud or something.
Exactly. So I kind of believe in that method of teaching, and
sure.
I foster it. We actually do have a whole selection of books on Anne Frank, and we have a whole section of our library devoted specifically to books on and about Anne Frank.
Do you get a lot of requests for the comic books?
We get some.
Mm-hmm. Are people able to use these books, the ones that are up here, so they get ideas for their own logos and creativity?
Absolutely. Absolutely, yes. Plus, a lot of the books are jumping off places for them to then do more research online and to get more information and more of the graphic material that's available.
This is a great timeline, what do you think, for teachers to try to get students, like, put down 1933, put down 1934, get a feel of the different things that can be studied. Maybe each student could do what happened, but this is just amazing.
It is one of our most valuable teaching tools.
So we're going to take a peek at what's downstairs. You want to give me a tour of what's down there? I really appreciate what you're doing. We're going to divide this episode up because guess what? We're going to also see an exhibit. And this is something that teachers can do, other people can do who's watching this. So if we can do it here in Las Vegas, you can do it anywhere around the world.
Absolutely, and especially because all of the classes that I'm teaching now are available online.
Wow.
And they're all virtual.
How do people reach you, Susan?
They can reach me through the website for the Sperling Kronberg Mack Holocaust Resource Center. Mm-hmm. My contact information is on the website.
Okay, and we will post that on this episode.
Great,
Thank
you.
You're going to take me downstairs.
We are in the downstairs portion of our Sperling Kronberg Mack Holocaust Resource Center, and this is actually the Synagogue Library. So we have about half of the space in here, and half of the space belongs to the synagogue. So our collection ends basically at the end of the table, and then the collection in the back is a synagogue collection.
And
but
these are books that survivors wrote here that are living in...
The books on display on this counter are by Las Vegas survivors, and I kind of cheated and put your book in there too, because I consider
I
you...
am from Las Vegas.
Yeah, I consider you part of Las Vegas. So one of the interesting collections that we have here is the Leopold Page collection. And Leopold Page was one of the people that was on Schindler's List, and he was actually the person that instigated Keneally to write the book Schindler's List, which was then made into the famous movie. This is the collection right here. These books in this side and that side. This picture, this photograph, is a picture of Leopold Page. He came and spoke at our library a number of years ago, and when he passed away, he gifted our library with his personal collection. In addition to his books, he also gave us a teapot that was made in the Schindler factory, which is upstairs in our artifact selection.
Can I ask you something, Susan? If there is no Susan, who will continue? Are you a one-person operation?
Right now I'm a one-person operation, but one of the things that we do during our teacher training is we train teacher Holocaust educators. In order to become a Holocaust educator, a teacher has to have completed 5 courses in Holocaust education. And then they are able to go on and teach about the Holocaust within the school district, but more importantly, they've had the training, so hopefully at some point one of them will take over for me.
I am so blessed that you have given us this interview. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So, Esther, I've got my mask off, you've got yours off. You're going to tell me a little bit about the exhibit. I'm going to back up for now.
Welcome to the West Charleston Library here in Las Vegas. And this is a public showing of our exhibit, How Did You Survive? I'd like to invite you to take a look. I'm one of the co-creators of this. My partner in crime, Heidi Straus, couldn't be here today, so maybe we'll do a fuller interview on Zoom so she can participate as well. But right now, let me introduce you to the exhibit. Our exhibit starts with 4 introductory panels. We have 2 here and 2 on the other side that give you a bit of an introduction in the Holocaust, some historical context. We start with Hitler's rise to power, and then we go through the discrimination against the Jews. and we move on to the persecution of the Jews and then the extermination. So this gives you some background, and then we will move into the body of the exhibit where you'll meet some of our Holocaust survivors. This exhibit is based primarily, but not exclusively, on local Holocaust survivors here in Las Vegas. Come join me. Each of the panels has 2 or 3 survivors featured on it, and they are linked in some way. So, for example, in this banner here, some of the children who survived the Holocaust had horrific experiences, including watching their loved ones die. You met Judy Mack at the Sperling Kronberg Mack Holocaust Resource Center. At least you saw her picture there. She's one of the founders of the Resource Center, and this is part of her story. For all of these banners, each of the survivors featured has more information available about them online. So this is an excellent teaching tool because the teachers can go back to their classrooms and have their students research everybody. And that was one of the reasons we picked these survivors. Here we have 2 hidden children. And one of the reasons we put them together, not just because they were hidden children, but Ann Jenner here, her whole family survived, which was incredibly rare. Whereas Ray Fiel was the only survivor in her family. She did not see her parents again. Her parents were taken to Auschwitz, and that was the end. This next banner, another example of how we tied these together. We have Ruth Zeitban and Gerda and Kurt Klein. Ruth Zeitban actually is my mother-in-law, so I have to put in a plug for her. She was with Gerda Klein from the ghetto through the camps until the death march. They got separated on the death march. Gerda met her husband Kurt, who was her liberator. Very famous story. So you can see she got an Academy Award for the documentary All But My Life, was turned into the documentary One Survivor Remembers, and she got the Academy Award for that. She married her liberator, and it was a wonderful love story. Ruth was liberated by the Russians and had a very, very different liberation experience. But here we have 2 sisters. One of them was hidden underground in a hole in the ground underneath a mechanic's garage for almost, but not quite 2 years. Long time to be in a hole in the ground. Her sister was hiding above ground under false papers. Now, most of these people, I would say of the 50 people that are featured, 50 survivors featured here, I know 49 of them. So I interviewed them. When I lived in Maryland, I interviewed them. And we did this banner to feature them, even though they're not locals, because their stories are so incredibly extraordinary. When I interviewed Yafa and I asked her about living in a hole in the ground, I was trying as best as my limited imagination would let me to get a sense of what it was like for her to be in this hole in the ground with her husband and some of her brothers. And it dawned on me, I was asking her, how did you get air? How did you get food? How did you remove wastes? And I started thinking, she's in a hole in the ground for over a year. I said, what was the condition of your skin? And she said something that I've always remembered. She said, the men, they didn't wash, but I, with a woman's vanity, took a few drops of the precious water to wash my face. I got goosebumps remembering that. Now, her sister got false papers and lived above ground. And she was pregnant, went to deliver her baby, and while she was in delivery, the Gestapo demanded to see her. And she thought, that's it, game over, I'm dead and my child is dead. Now, the Gestapo was checking up on the midwife who had broken curfew. So she was able to go back to labor and delivery and deliver her child. And she and the child survived. So these are 2 sisters who had dramatically different wartime experiences. We tried to get as much breadth and scope as we could. We include refugees, those who got out before the shooting started. We include those who were hidden children, those who were hidden adults. We have people who were in the camps. We have people who were in the resistance, who fought back. Let me share with you one or two very unusual ones. Well, I have to show this one. This is Rena Finder, who, believe it or not, I don't think we're related, even though we have the same last name.
Wow.
We have nobody left to ask. I've been in touch with Rena many times over the years. There's nobody left to ask if we are or are not related. But she was a survivor on Schindler's List. This is Alice Masters. She was saved by Nicholas Winton. She didn't know for years who saved her. He saved 669 children, right. This is William Pearl. This gentleman here is standing with Steven Spielberg. This gentleman has been credited with saving 40,000 lives by smuggling Jews into Palestine in the 30s. When I interviewed him, he said, no, too many. How many did you save? Only 18,000. Down here, Siegfried Rommler was one of the pioneers of simultaneous translation at the Nuremberg trials. Another refugee who went back to fight. This is Fred Mayer, of blessed memory. If it weren't for Fred, Sandy, you and I might never have been born, because Fred was a refugee turned spy. He volunteered to go back into Nazi Germany after he and his family had gotten out. They got out before the war started. He went back, and he was one of the most successful American spies during World War II, and he's been credited with shortening the war by 6 months. Yes, so I know I'm not supposed to have favorites, but if it weren't for him, I might never have been born, because my parents would not have survived another 6 months of war. My father was the only Jew to survive in his transport, and my mother was so hungry she tried to eat grass. I don't think either of them would have made another 6 months of war. This is our X-rated banner. It's very graphic. And we have this separate, so if this exhibit goes to schools, the teachers can decide. This is Heidi's brainchild. Heidi really wanted to have a call to action. So after people have seen this exhibit, she asks, what will you do now? Mm-hmm. And this is some pictures from our survivors today. We took them to the local NBC TV station because our weatherman is child of survivors. Here's a panel speaking at a school. This is a favorite picture of mine.
Oh, of course.
I was able to help get the survivors an honorary doctorate.
I think this is the first time I've never given you a hug.
6 feet. 6 feet.
I mean, it's just crazy, it's crazy. We want to thank you so much for watching. For more information about the panels, come visit
the West Charleston Library here in Las Vegas.
West Charleston Library. The resource center that you saw is able to help you, and should the exhibit move, the resource center will tell you where they are.
Yes, we're here till March 2nd.
Okay, till March 2nd, but I know that your panels will be traveling.
Yes, we have 2 sets of panels, and so they're available to travel, and we are working on an online exhibit.
Right.
Which should be in the not too distant future.
Okay, with that, Esther Finder and myself, Sandra Scheller from Comic-Con Education, will be probably doing more Zooms about things as we know what's happening. Stay tuned for Comic-Con this year, 2021, I believe, and I pray that our Holocaust panel will be back on. It's something we really look forward to. We have some new and exciting things that we'll be putting in that, and without getting too much in trouble, thank you, Esther. Heidi Straus, what a pleasure it is to talk to you. You are a Holocaust educator in beautiful Las Vegas, and your way of creating the education for people to see is through the use of panels. You created a group of panels as far as getting them printed, designed with information on there. Talk to me a little bit about that, please.
Well, as a Holocaust educator, we need different tools in our toolbox. Just as your handyman has a screwdriver and a wrench and all these other things, the panels are one of the many tools in the arsenal to teach teachers, to teach students, to teach everyday people the stories of the Holocaust and the lessons to be learned. Each panel can be transformed into a class in itself. It's very interesting. We put 2 to 3 local survivors here in our Las Vegas community on a panel, and we talk about their experiences. One is maybe a shared experience of hidden children. So there were people that had to hide those children. And of course, if you hid a Jewish child, you could be killed for doing so. And in some countries, your entire family. So now we can look at not just the saved, but the saviors. It's very interesting.
Heidi, what you've done is you have brought food to the table for your own superheroes in the community because they're on panels. That if God forbid something happens to that person, we have to be realistic. They're 90 years old, 95 years old. One of them, I believe, is over 100. I'm not sure.
Henry Kronberg shares the same birthday as I do. He's our oldest survivor.
Really?
He'll be 101 on April the 14th.
Oh my gosh, Heidi. Explain to me some of the superheroes that are on the panels.
I think these survivors, to me, are superheroes, number one, for sharing their stories. That took a lot of courage.
Mm-hmm.
And to quote Elie Wiesel, the Nobel laureate, if you listen to a survivor or a witness, you then become a witness. So they're sharing their information with all of us, and it is our duty to continue to share our information. Another way I think they're heroes is in their golden years, in their last days, when they could be on a cruise or sitting watching TV, they're going to schools and putting it together and talking to students and reliving their stories so that others, these children, can hear it. This is unbelievable. This is generosity. This is grace. And those are our local heroes. But we've got superheroes throughout the panel exhibit, some that are not locals and some that you will know their names, such as an Oskar Schindler, for example.
That's tremendous. Heidi, you did something on the panels that were really, really amazing. In fact, we won't even use the word panels. We're going to use the word panel, and that is a call for action. Tell me what it's like to be able to have people go through the exhibit, and then you put out there, now that you people have seen this panel, what are you going to do about it? You actually take this and say, what can people do to get involved? Explain that.
I didn't want to create this banner exhibit just to entertain and give somebody something to do on a Sunday afternoon. This was created so that we can educate the viewer with the historical context of the process of the murdering of the Jews, of 6 million Jews and 5 million non-Jews, others of minority populations, but then show the experiences of the subjects on the panels and now ask the viewer something. We're asking of them to now think, what now are you going to do now that you've seen the result of hatred? What now are you going to do about it? Are you going to go, nah, nothing? Are you just going to be a bystander? Because your number could come up one day too. You just don't know. But now you know what hatred will do. You know what bystanders or those that were perpetrators are capable of. Humans, normal people, were turned into killers. They weren't born killers, not in general. No. Entire populations were transformed to be murderers. There's a lot to think about. And so now, knowing that it's possible, because no one ever believed it would be possible, now that you know it's possible, what will you do when you see the first signs of it? Because that's how it starts.
How do you begin to talk about the Holocaust? And what is the youngest age that you would want to have see the panels?
That's a great question. So we have one single panel that has the scary pictures, the imagery of atrocities, the imagery with propaganda of bodies strung up, of torture. Those will not go into the middle school and high schools. Those will go into the libraries.
And if you had a group of people coming to the library and they were young enough, you just have to remove that one panel.
Correct. We call it Banner X or the X-rated banner. And we ask the libraries or the universities, would you like X, yes or no? We're in Las Vegas, and in Nevada, there's a different sensitivity, I think, and the gallery people felt comfortable to show it. That's an internal, that's for them to decide.
It's portable. It takes 2 minutes to turn it, to slide it down. It's brilliant.
What could we do to help solve the problem? We don't have the bricks and mortar. We don't need the bricks and mortar. I would love the bricks and mortar, but until then, I'm not going to sit by, and we're going to create a pop-up museum. So if you only have 30 square feet, I can create a full museum for you.
In 30 full feet.
Well, if we have to, we can, because we can use the 4 introductory banners. You must give historical context. You must have a bookend on each end, and that starts with the introduction. You must know. I can't assume, I can't make an assumption that you already know about the process. You cannot teach unless you give the historical background, and it is very digestible. So people in middle school who will have started by reading the Diary of Anne Frank will have already had some preliminary knowledge about Nazis. They will have heard of Germany. They will have heard of hatred towards Jews and hatred towards communists, or hatreds towards anybody, Afro-Germans, or anybody who's different, anyone who isn't the pure Aryan ideal. Those were the people that were killed.
And I'm sorry for interrupting you. What age do you think one should learn about the Holocaust? Where do we begin? Is it elementary, middle? Of course, we know high school, but where do you think one should start?
I ask myself this question all the time. I took my first formal Holocaust class in college, yet we teach Night by Elie Wiesel in the high schools. I don't believe Night should be read too young, but we do teach Anne Frank in 6th grade. Many English teachers will teach Anne Frank, some history teachers in the 2nd semester, typically when they're into World War II. Mm-hmm. You can start teaching it then, but you can't, it's only the beginning of the education. Teaching Anne Frank is very important because she's so normal and she's an everyman. She can be all of us. She's so relatable that she's a wonderful tool. You can't teach if the student, if they're scared. If you're teaching with fear, they will not be receptive. So Anne Frank is a wonderful entree. So I'm real keen on 6th grade, 7th grade, but I mean G-rated.
Heidi,
G-rated.
Personal question. When did you first hear the word Holocaust?
I was a young girl. This is so funny, but I had a manicurist, was very lucky. And she was a Holocaust survivor. And I was about 10. And I was talking to her. I said, do you have children? She said, no, I can't. I said, what do you mean you can't? She said, I was in the Holocaust. I said, I don't even really know what the Holocaust is. Why can't you have children? She said, they sterilized me. I go, they use alcohol? What do you mean they sterilized? And it was just too much for my age. It was. But what you can teach is about, you can start with different lessons.
You remember that. I found out when one day my mother had a nightmare. I was between 6 and 7 years old. I heard my mom screaming in the middle of the night. That's how I found out. My dad came to me and said, your mom had a nightmare. We'll talk about it in the morning. He came to me and he said, you know, Mom thought that she was in the Holocaust. Holocaust? I mean, you know, but it's so important because you have found a way with tools to teach this, not just to people in Nevada, but to all over.
You've got to build an arsenal. This banner exhibit is one tool in the arsenal, and it's a very strong one. I know you do Comic-Con, and this is Comic-Con. And
this is Comic-Con.
I love Comic-Con. Superheroes are the name of the game. And boy, do we have some superheroes featured whose names we know, like Raoul Wallenberg and Oscar Schindler and Sir Nicholas Winton.
Oh, yes.
But you know who the heroes are that we don't know their names are, let's say, the Catholic Church who hid a little child and taught her the prayers so that she could recite them to save her own life.
Yeah.
And the farmer who hid them for 2 nights on the run when they were starving and freezing. How about those heroes? We're never going to know them. Those are superheroes too.
Wait. And now the superheroes that are Holocaust survivors that are digging deep in their soul to tell their story. And you have become a superhero, Miss Heidi, because you have found a way to capture them on these panels. And it is really exciting. We look forward to catching up with you in the future to see new things that you're doing, new exciting things that you're doing. I just want to let people know that we are part of the Comic-Con education. So whether you do Holocaust panels or other kind of panels, make it a point to continue educating so that students can go into a room and see things without having to use their computers. They can talk to one another. This is most exciting.
You can bet on that. That's a deal.
Thanks so much.
Thank you,
Thank
Sandy.
you so much for watching, everybody. This is for Comic-Con Education. It's an honor and a pleasure to be with you. Today we featured myself, Sandra Scheller, Heidi Straus, Esther Finder, and Susan Dubin. Thanks so much for watching. Bye.